بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. فما بعد, my dear brothers and sisters, Alhamdulillah, 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 Rabbi laka alhamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhika wa li azimi sultanik. O Allah, all praise and thanks to you in keeping with the glory and magnificence of your countenance and the glory and magnificence of your kingdom. My brothers and sisters, we have a religion which is based on a book, and the book is Al-Qur'an Al-Kareem. This book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though we refer to it as a book, but it came as the spoken word. It did not come as the written word. It was preserved, and even in preservation, it was first preserved by memory, by memorizing it. And then, even more importantly, it was preserved by people believing in it and living by it, by its practice. And then it was preserved also in writing. So the Qur'an al-Majid is preserved in three ways, as I have mentioned to you, by memorizing, by living it, and by writing it down, or in whatever form. Now we have, of course, preservation also in electronic form and so on and so forth. The point is that when we are talking about the hifz of Qur'an, memorization of the Qur'an, we give a lot of importance to it, and it is important. There is nothing wrong with that. We should give importance. We should memorize it. The entire Qur'an, or as much of it as we can. We must continuously make effort. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy. But what is the real hifz of Qur'an? If we take another word from the same root word, and that word in Urdu is hifazat, and the one who does hifz, he's called or she is called hafiz or hafiza, and the one who does hifazat, he's called muhafiz, the one who does hifazat, who guards, who takes care. So one is the one who memorizes the Qur'an, and the other one is the one who guards it and protects it. The two can be the same, but sometimes they're not the same. Some of of course, we have the best of them is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, who was both an hafiz and muhafiz. He was the one who memorized the Qur'an and also who protected the Qur'an by teaching it, by living it, by explaining it, by demonstrating what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent in the Qur'an al-Kareem. And we have all the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, who are the best of examples for mankind, alhamdulillah. But in more, not recent as in very close to our times, but later times, we have the examples of different people, of course, all over the world, but some of the finest examples are in Cape Town, where we have Sheikh Yusuf of Makassar. These were prisoners of war who were exiled from Indonesia, the Malayan peninsula, that whole area, Indonesia, Malaysia. These were not countries with those names at that time. They was called Malay. And so they were people who were fighting the Dutch colonialists. So they were captured and they were exiled to the Cape of Good Hope, which is where Cape Town now is. And they were imprisoned there, some on Robben Island, some on the mainland, but in extremely inhospitable and terrible conditions. But people like this, Sheikh Yusuf And then another one who is also very well known, who's called Tuan Guru. And it's called Tuan Guru because Tuan, it means prince, and he was a prince. And that is Imam Abdullah Qadi Abdul Salam, Rahimahullahi Ta'ala, and Sheikh Yusuf of Mukassar, Rahmatullah alayhi, Rahimahullahi Ta'ala, who were not just Hufaz of the Qur'an, but when they were exiled, they were just, obviously they were prisoners, so they didn't let them take anything, including the Qur'an. But alhamdulillah, they were Hufaz to the extent that they wrote the Qur'an from memory, and they wrote it perfectly correctly without any mistakes. And Tuan Guru himself, that is Imam Abdullah Qadi Abdul Salam, Rahmatullah alayhi, when he was released from prison, he set up the first madrasa in 1767. He was imprisoned and brought to Cape Town, and then he was released from jail in 1793, and he established a madrasa in that year, and that was the foundation of Islam in Africa, in South Africa, not Africa, in South Africa. And these were the pioneers who came and who brought Africa, who brought Islam to that part of the continent. Many a time, some young person comes to me and says, please make dua for me, I want to memorize the Qur'an. Many times I've had young parents come to me saying, please make dua for my child, I want him or her to become a Hafiz. But in all these years, I have yet to hear somebody say, please make dua for me, I want to understand the Qur'an and I want to live by the Qur'an. Right? Now, of course, I make dua that people should become Hufaz of the Qur'an. I would also like to be a Hafiz of the Qur'an. But this leads me to question our understanding of the word Hafiz, which of course means, one of the meanings is somebody who memorizes, but also Muhafiz means protector. So it's true that the one who memorizes the Qur'an is a Hafiz, but what if all he really made hifz of is the sound of the ayat, not their meaning, and he did not make any effort to implement it. So what therefore must we call such a person who has memorized the sound but has no clue about the meaning? To make a long story short, this is the state of the majority of people who memorize the Qur'an today, especially in countries which are not Arabic speaking. Even among the Arabs, because Arabic today has so many different dialects, and the Qur'an is in classical Arabic, there are many Arabs who do not understand the Qur'an, the classical Arabic of the Qur'an. So when they memorize and they are reciting, they're as good or bad as an Indian or a Pakistani or somebody who is reciting from memory, because they don't understand what they're saying. I recall an amusing incident which was narrated to me by one of the famous Qaris in Hyderabad, and he had very beautiful Qur'an. So he said he went to Saudi Arabia once, and they asked him to lead Salah, so he led Salah and he read Ayat from Surah Yusuf. And he said that when he finished Salah and he turned around to sit, he saw one of the Saudi men who was praying behind him. He looked extremely amused. He was like almost, he looked like he wanted to burst out laughing. So this man said, I found that a little strange, and after Sunnah and all finished, the man was still there. So he said, I couldn't stop myself. So I went up to him and I asked him, I said, you look very amused, as if something very funny has happened. I mean, does that have to do with me? Did I say or do something which, So if so, please tell me, what is it? What did I do or say that is so funny? He said, no, I apologize. I'm not trying to make fun of you and so on. He said, no, tell me, what is it? I mean, what did I do? He said, you put Yusuf alayhi salam in the well and you did not take him out. Right? So the ayat that he recited in the of Surah Yusuf, where he finished the recitation, was when Yusuf alayhi salam had been put into the well. Now, normally, it is not part of it's not fard or anything like this. As far as the salah is concerned, the salah is valid, there is no problem. But anybody who's reciting, understanding the meaning of the Qur'an, whether it's in Surah Yusuf or anywhere, if he starts reciting from any part of the Qur'an, he will make sure that the mazmoon, the meaning, the incident, the subject of that set of ayat is completed in the recitation of that salah, so that somebody listening can make some meaning out of it. He won't sort of end in the middle of something where, part of an order or part of something has been said, and then you are left there mu'allaq, suspended in the air, so to speak, and you don't know what else happened after that. You would never do that. Now, in this case, he said he did it. So he said, I found this very amusing. You put Yusuf alayhi salam in the well and we never took him out. So this gentleman said, I'm very sorry, but I don't understand what I recite. So he said, I felt very ashamed that I did not understand, that this man caught me out, that I didn't understand what I recited. Having said that, of course, on a side note, please understand that to knowingly or either deliberately or accidentally to humiliate somebody in public, this is haram in Islam. Please understand that. You might think you are a great scholar and you want to point a finger at somebody and pick somebody's fault, but if you are doing it in public, then you are committing something which Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam prohibited and which is a sin, and may Allah protect you. The hurt and humiliation that you cause to that individual will be on your scales on the Day of Judgment. So please understand that. Right? If somebody makes a mistake, then if you are so interested in correcting them, then take them aside somewhere, maintain the person's dignity, and then you say what you have to say to the person, but not in public, not in front of other people, where the person obviously will feel hurt and humiliated and sad. So let's ask this question, when we're talking about memorizing and so on and so forth. Why was the Quran revealed? Just think about it. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send the Quran? Did He send it so we could memorize its sound and then we live our lives any way we like? We recite the Quran as part of a formal worship ritual and we do nothing else? Or did it come so that we can understand it, we can reflect on it, and we can live our lives according to it? I know it's a dumb question. But if you look at what we do, then it's not such a dumb question. We have to ask ourselves that if indeed we believe that the Quran came to be understood and to be implemented in our lives, for our lives to be lived by the Qur'an. If this is the reason why the Qur'an was revealed, then how come we make no effort to understand it, much less to live our lives by it, and we are content and satisfied with memorizing some of it and then listening to it mostly in Taraweeh, in Ramadan, or like nowadays it's common with other people, with a lot of people, that they just listen to the Quran while driving and so on and so forth. And may Allah protect us, for a lot of people it's like some kind of background sound that's happening. Is that why the Quran was revealed? Was it revealed as sound? Nice sound, but just sound? Or is it an actual message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent for us? Let's see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the author of the Quran. Who is the author of the Quran? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's see what he said. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَخْفَالُهَا. Do they not, in Surah Muhammad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, do they not then reflect and think deeply in the Quran? Or are their hearts locked up from understanding it? I remember many years ago, more than 20 years ago, I met this American guy who was from, I think he was from North Hampshire or Maine or something, one of the northeast states, way north. And I asked him, I usually ask, reverts how they came to Islam. It's a very interesting and very inspiring stories. So this guy says to me that he was enrolled in a seminary, Christian seminary, and he was doing a course, and he says his task was he was given a translation of the Quran, and he was told to find mistakes in it. Let's say, look for this, look for mistakes. So he said, I read that thing from cover to cover. And I was so hugely impressed that he said, when I finished reading it, he said, I'm looking at it, in the front, in the back, first page, second page, at the back, and so on, to find the name of the author. I said, who wrote this thing? And he said, there is no name. There is no name, the name of the author is not there. And then he said, of course, when I read it, I know that this is supposed to be the direct word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I told him, I said, what struck you in the Quran? What is it that you were so impressed by? He said, the majesty of the address. He said, when I read the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is directly speaking and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about himself, he's giving his own introduction, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. He said that I was struck by the glory and majesty of this address, and I said to myself that this cannot be the word of any human being. That no human being can speak like this. He said this has to be the Creator, Jalla Jalaluhu. Ajib. So this man says, and I told you, he's way up. He said, I did this, and I was reading it for many days, weeks, months. And he says, one night, it was very late in the night when it struck me that this is the truth. This is the truth. And I wanted to become Muslim. I wanted to enter Islam. But he said, in my whole state, there's no mosque, there's no masjid. And he said, I'm talking about about 20 years ago. So, he didn't have access to, there was no internet and all that sort of stuff. I mean, there was internet, but, it wasn't as easy. There weren't any smartphones and stuff. So he said that I remembered that the nearest masjid was in Boston, which is a couple of 100 miles from where he was. So I said, what did you do? Did you go to Boston next morning? He said, no, not next morning. I went then. Ajib, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in the hearts of people. So I said, you, in that cold and, that time of the night, you drove from where you were all the way to Boston? He said, yeah. He said, all the way to Boston. It took him some 4 hours or 6 hours or something like this. And he said, he drove all night, and, next day, he reached Boston, and he is hunting around for a masjid, and finally he found the main mosque in Boston. And there he met a very dear friend of mine, Sheikh Abdul Badi, and then he accepted Islam on his hand. This is the power of the Quran al-Karim. And my point is, does it affect us? Does it affect us? Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here that Allah sent this kalam and He mentioned reflecting on the Quran. And He called those who don't do that people whose hearts are locked up. Now I know this ayat came for disbelievers, but I wonder what we will say if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us this question. If Allah asks me, do you reflect on the Quran? What will I say? If Allah asks you this question and says, do you reflect on the Quran? What will you say? My brothers and sisters, there are 228 ayat in the Quran mentioned in Allah's book, but not in a single one in which He mentioned His book. 228 ayahs in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned His book. But not in a single one of them did He say that it is sufficient to memorize its sound without understanding it and living by it. So how do we justify not only doing this but insisting that it is not necessary for a Hafid to learn the meaning of what he is reciting? And even worse, our claim that if he learns the meaning, he will not be able to memorize it. How did the Sahaba then memorize it? Now, the reason I'm saying this is because this is an argument I had, may Allah protect the man from himself, with one so-called alim in Hyderabad. And to this day, the man was very offended with me, and till today he is very angry with me. That's okay, he can be angry. He's angry because I refuse to accept this statement from him to say that if the child knows the meaning of what he is memorizing, he cannot memorize. And I told him this is complete nonsense. This is complete nonsense. And then he had this other argument where he said, then he cannot memorize in 2 years. So I said, where did you get the 2 years from? Where is it to say, where is it given, where is it directed, what is the hukam? Is there an ayat in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the Quran must be memorized in 2 years, not in 3 years? These are all things that we have created for ourselves and lost the essence of what we are doing, lost the purpose of what we are doing. Among another big issue, we talked about the issue of reflection. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Do they not reflect on the Quran? My submission to you is the ayat of the Quran. Now the ayah, mercifully in Urdu also the word is ayat, so we don't change that. But in English translations, and a lot of people who teach the Quran use the word verse with respect to ayah. Now there is a problem with English translations because a lot of English translations were done either by Orientalists or by people who were influenced by Orientalists, or they were done by people who were English speaking, but English was not their first language, English was not their native language, and they didn't speak English with that command. And I like to believe that it is a mistake. It's not that they did it deliberately. Husn zan about my brothers and sisters. They inadvertently and unconsciously imbibed the Christian nomenclature in translation of the Quran. So, for example, they translate the word ayah as verse. They translate the word abd as servant. Right? They translate the word Rabb as Lord. What else? And there are other things like this. Now, I'll tell you why I'm saying this, and I seriously request you give it some thought. And if you use this kind of terminology, please change it. Please do not use it. Because first and foremost, it is completely and totally wrong. Grammatically, I'm not even talking about theologically, just purely grammatically. We have now Google Translator. Go put up go to English to Arabic translation, put the word there, verse, and see what the Arabic word comes. You will not get ayah, you will get share, right? You will get share, which means verse, which is an element of poetry. Now my point is, if the Qur'an, what is your aqidah about the Qur'an? Is it a book of poetry with verses? Or is it the kalam, the book and the speech of Allah with ayat, with the ayah? Now, what is the big deal? I'll tell you why the big deal and how that is related to reflection. The big deal is that ayah means sign. Now, a sign, what is a sign? A sign is something which has meaning, and it has significant meaning, and this meaning forces us to reflect on the sign and then to act according to that sign, right? So, when you're driving down the road and you come to an intersection and you find the traffic light is red, what is that? That's an ayah. That's a sign. What does that sign mean? That sign means that you should stop. Why is that important? Because if you don't stop, at best, you might get a ticket. At worst, you might kill yourself and others. So that sign is not decoration, right? It's not Christmas lighting. It is a serious ayah. It is a sign, and the sign has meaning. When a doctor, when a physician looks at a patient and he or she diagnoses, he's doing clinical diagnosis, what are they doing? They're looking for signs. Not looking for verses, looking for signs. Signs of what? Signs of disease, potential disease. And because of their knowledge, they are able to diagnose that disease. Just last Friday, Dr. Ali and myself, we were going to the masjid. And when we came to the intersection on the highway near the McDonald's, where we take a left turn to come onto Amerstown Road, there was an accident. There was this lady who rear-ended a truck, and her car sort of went literally under the truck. And the ambulance was there and police and so on, and they were pulling her out. And obviously her legs were damaged, and she was in great pain, so she was screaming. We could hear her screaming. So I said, oh my God, poor thing, she's screaming, how terrible. Dr. Ali said to me, that's a good sign. So I said, her screaming is a good sign? He said, yes. I said, why? He said, because it means that she has sensation, she is conscious, she is aware, she probably doesn't have a concussion, and there's no damage to her brain, there's no damage to her nerves and her feeling. So even though she's in pain and she's screaming, all of these are good signs. Now what is he talking about? And how is he saying that? He's saying that because he's a neurologist, he has knowledge. And based on the knowledge, he's interpreting signs, and even though he and I are both looking at the same scene, we have completely different views of that scene. We have completely different understanding of that scene on the basis of the knowledge. He has specialized knowledge, and I don't have that specialized knowledge. So the signs of ayah, the ayah means sign. Use those words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have said ash'ar. He didn't say. He said ayat. لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Not ash'ar. Then how do you say verse? Allah said in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of the night and the day, there are signs for people of understanding, not poetry, not ashar. Signs. Why? So that they may recognize their Rabb Jalla Jalaluhu by looking at his signs. This is a sign of Allah. This is a sign of the khudrat of Allah. This is a sign of the rahmat of Allah. This is a sign of the mercy of Allah. This is a sign of the power of creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, the word abd is translated servant. Again, as I told you, grammatically wrong. Go do a Google thing on it. Abd means slave. Now, a lot of people feel very, politically incorrect using the word slave. Please understand, slavery of human beings is completely and totally wrong. If slavery is not wrong, nothing is wrong. But being a slave of Allah is the highest honor that a human being can possibly get. And that's not my understanding alone, and it's not my statement. That is the title that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abdihi. Subhanalladhi asra bi abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa alladhi barakna hawlahu linuriyahu min ayatina. Allah glorified is He who took His slave, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, abdihi. Go put the word servant in the Google translator. What will it give you? It gives you khadim. A khadim is a servant and abd is a slave. Allah did not say, Subhanalladhi asra bi khadimihi. Allah says, abdihi. Please do not mistranslate the Qur'an. Now, why is that a big deal? Again, completely different. Just like sign and verse. A verse is a verse. It's poetry. You may, at best, you may enjoy it, you may like it, you may not like it. You can ignore it. It doesn't matter. But a sign, it's not a matter of liking and disliking. If you ignore a sign, you ignore a sign at your own peril. If you are an intelligent person, you will know to read the signs that apply to you. Same thing between servant and slave. Khadim and abd. Who is a servant? A servant is somebody who is employed by somebody. Maybe an organization, maybe an individual. He is an employee. A servant enters employment at will. He or she can leave that employment at will. I don't like working for you. Here is my resignation letter. Goodbye. I'm gone. When I am your servant, when I am working for you, you give me a salary, that is it. You do not have any more responsibility. You only have to fulfill whatever responsibility that you owned, whatever responsibility you accepted as being my employer. That's it. What about a slave? Can a slave just walk away and say, goodbye, I'm no longer your slave? No. Why is slavery wrong? Slavery is wrong because a human being is treated as the property of another human being. As if he belongs to that human being, as if he is the property of another human being. Like this pen belongs to me, I can break it if I want. My pen. It can be a stupid thing to do. Why would I want to break a pen? But I'm saying if I did, I'm not committing any crime because this thing belongs to me. And that is why slavery of human beings is wrong. And that is how we understand slavery of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we belong to Allah. And that is the reason why, because we belong to Allah, no human being can claim that we belong to Him. Why is slavery wrong? Because we belong to Allah. You cannot be the abd of two people at the same time. You can be the servant. You can have a day job and a night job, right? I can be working for a company. I can also be working from home for somebody else. I can be getting multiple salaries from multiple places. I can be employed multiply in different places. But I cannot be the slave of more than one person. And I'm already the slave of Allah. So how can I be the slave of somebody else? That is why slavery is wrong. Because slavery is wrong because it's intrinsically wrong. It's a crime against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and against a human being. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this object, this human being is owned, he cannot go anywhere. He cannot leave Allah and go somewhere. And if he disobeys Allah and he leaves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or tries to leave, first of all, he cannot do that. If he tries to do that, if he rebels, then he is wrong because he is rebelling against his owner. And then, unlike in the case of the servant, he is not simply getting a salary. The owner is responsible for every need of the slave. The owner cannot simply say, well, I paid your salary, goodbye. No, every need of the slave. So when we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Jalla Jalaluhu, we must worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a slave. Abdan shakura. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam called himself. They asked him, Ya Rasulullah, why do you exert yourself so much in worship? You stand all night, your feet are swollen, your blessed feet are swollen. Why do you need to do that? When your sins have been forgiven, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave everything you did and everything you might do in the future. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sinless, he didn't commit any sins and he was not going to commit any sins, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew this. This is just a way of honoring his Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So say the Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha and some other people, they ask, Ya Rasulullah, why this is everything, the ayat have been revealed. I mean, you are sinless and you are protected and you cannot commit any sin. Why do you still make so much effort? What did he say? He said, should I not be a grateful slave? Abdan shakura. May Allah protect our people who translate this as grateful servant. Where is the servant? Where is the servant? You want to cut your tie with Allah as his abd and change it to servant? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Astaghfirullah al-azim. We are the ibad of Allah. We are not the khuddam of Allah. Abduhu wa rasuluhu. Not khadimuhu wa rasuluhu. I am the abd of Allah, and I want to ensure that I always remain the abd of Allah. And I want to reiterate before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, I am your abd. You own me. I belong to you. I belong to you. You created me. It is not by my will, it is by your will that I am your slave. And why is that important? Because if I am his slave, then he will look after me. Because that is his responsibility. It is the responsibility of the owner to take care of his slave. Who is a good owner? A good owner is the one whose slaves are happy, whose slaves are taken care of, who are protected, and who is a better owner than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Jalla Jalaluhu. Right? Reflect on the Qur'an. This is the title of this series of classes. The final one before we close today is Lord. There is a world of difference between Rabb and Lord. Lord, first of all, is a title. Secondly, it means chief. Lord of the manor. Now, one of the meanings in a human sense, in Arabic also we say Rabbul Bayt, Lord of the manor. But Rabb as in Rabbul Alameen is very different. Rabb as in Rabbul Alameen is the one who takes something which is incomplete, shay nakhis, to the stage of kamal, to the stage of perfection, batadrij, by stages. The one who nourishes, the one who guides and who gives hidayah. سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى. الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى. My brothers and sisters, please think about this, reflect on this thing. What Lord? Rabb. Final point. Sometimes people give this very lame argument. They say, if we say Rabb and so on, non-Muslims don't understand. My point is, let them not understand, because then they will ask you a question. And if they ask you a question, this opens the door for you to give dawah to them. Because if you don't do that, if you say Lord, then they understand Lord in whichever way they understand the word. I remember a very powerful incident which happened with me. I was in Masjid al-Nabawi Sharif, and after Ibadat everything was over, I was just sitting there in one corner, and I sent a message to a few friends of mine saying, I am here in Masjid al-Nabawi and I am making dua for you. Now, accidentally, I sent, and that was not my intention. I sent a message only to my Muslim friends, but accidentally, one of those messages went to a Hindu friend of mine who lives in Jaipur. By accident, I didn't even know that. So I sent a message to a whole bunch of Muslim friends, and somehow this Hindu guy who lives in Jaipur is a good friend of mine. Message went to him also. First of all, the only one who responded was that Hindu guy. May Allah protect us and Muslims. And he replied and said, please make an offering to Lord Allah on my behalf. Right? Because he is coming from, when he goes to a temple, he makes an offering to Lord Ganesh, to Lord Rama, to Lord Krishna, and so on. So when you say Lord, he thinks like Lord Ganesh, Lord Rama, Lord Allah. Na'udhu billah. But if you say Rabbul Alameen, there's nothing that he can join that to. So he has to ask you, what did you just say? What is Rabbul Alameen? Who is Rabbul Alameen? And that opens the door for us to give dawah to the person. I request you, please think about this, reflect on it, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to approach His kalam in a way that pleases Him and where He will be pleased with us. ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على نبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.